Well, welcome to week 4. You're halfway done with this little short course in biblical interpretation and teaching. And last week, your assignment was to select your pericope and ask 3 vital questions about that pericope and try to get the answers. This week, you're going to go a little further into the development of the study that you're doing on this passage of Scripture in preparation for next week's assignment, and that is that you're going to be doing a word study. Hopefully, all of you understand, especially after reading this week's assignments and looking through the assignments, understand exactly what that means. As all of you know, the Bible, the scriptures that we use today, were not written in the language that we read them in. They were written in the original languages of primarily Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic. But the translations that we use today were translated from the Hebrew Bible and from the Greek New Testament, again, for the most part. And so it is very helpful sometimes, especially when there are words that are not familiar to us or words that we don't use in our everyday language, or words that we may suspect have different meanings now than they had when the scriptures were written. It's helpful to do a word study. And there are lots of ways to do that, but we have decided that for this course, what we're going to ask you to use is a digital online resource called blueletterbible.org. I've used this resource for many, many years, although I have lots of regular books and word studies and interlineary scriptures to help me, but on the fly. And when I'm doing at least cursory word studies, the Blue Letter Bible seems very, very helpful to me. And so I recommend it, and you're going to get used to using it just a little bit in this course. So, how does that work? Well, there's a tutorial for you in how to use the Blue Letter Bible, but in very short order, I can tell you that you can go to blueletterbible.org, put in the passage of Scripture, the pericope that you've chosen. It will bring it up. You are to look at it in at least 3 versions, the New American Standard and a couple of others that I've recommended, although you can use your favorite version if you would like to use the ESV, or if you'd like to use some other version, even King James Version. I know some of you prefer that. That's fine. Look it up in 3 different versions. There'll be a tab on there that you can change the version that you're seeing it in. And then pick out words that you believe might be crucial to understanding in order to correctly interpret and teach this pericope that you have chosen. Let me go back to the example I used in week 3 of Joshua crossing the Jordan River with the Israelites and exactly what that looked like. We asked those 3 questions last week that might help us to interpret Scripture. But we're going to take it a step further this week, and we're going to talk about the words that are actually used in that passage of Scripture. As I look back at that passage just a few moments ago, one of the words, or a couple of the words that intrigued me, was when God stops the flow of the river and causes it to create a dry walkway for the children of Israel to walk across. The words that are used there are that the water stood up and raised up. Now, I can picture that, but I wanted to know what those words really mean in the original language. And so I looked them up on blueletterbible.org, and it lent some clarification, but it also gave me some latitude in the interpretation of that. The bottom line is perhaps the way God caused that to happen was to stop the flow of the river long enough for it to create this walkway for the children of Israel to go across. It could have been the stopping of the flow that caused the waters to stand still and to rise up or raise up and create this ability for the children of Israel to cross over. That's what you're going to do. You're going to choose some words out of this pericope that you have chosen, this passage of scripture that you've chosen. You're going to take the blueletterbible.org and then look those words up in the original language, whether it be Hebrew or Greek. There's instructions on how to do that. You're going to click on the verse once you bring it up. That's going to bring up the Hebrew and Greek translations for you, and then you can even go deeper into that. There are actually some word study excerpts that are there to show you where that word is used in other places of Scripture, which may give you some insight. So that's part of your assignment this week in determining how you will interpret that pericope that you've chosen. The other is that you're going to listen to a sermon by John Ortberg, a wonderful speaker, fabulous writer, is a man who's written lots of books, and this is an interesting sermon because it is a sermon that borders on a study in apologetics in some ways, and seeks to verify and affirm who Jesus is. But near the end of this sermon, it may get rather emotional for you, depending on how it affects you and how you hear what he has to say. The first time through, that wasn't so much true for me, but as I listened to it a few more times, I got kind of an emotional attachment to what he was saying, and it was moving for me. And so I'll be interested to see how it affects you. Be honest in your responses as you discuss it on your discussion posts. I'll be interested to also see how you react and interact with one another about the responses that you have had in listening to this John Ortberg sermon. All right? So we're getting very close now. At the end of this week, you need to be prepared with your pericope, with the questions you've asked, and perhaps more than the 3 that we required you to ask, word study, and again, perhaps more than we required you to do in this class, so that you can write your paper in week 5, which is a study in this pericope that you have chosen. I think it's going to be exciting for you to do it, and perhaps it will shed some new light on this passage of scripture that you've chosen, and also maybe be a foundation for a teaching that you can do later on using the work that you've done in this class. As always, if you have questions or problems, please contact me, and enjoy week 4 in biblical interpretation and teaching.